All right. Go to the next talk, right? All right, hello everybody. I wanted to, and Deborah, were you going to be involved in this at all, or because we only have one mic? We have the golden mic. But anyway. Okay, cool. So I want to talk about subnet DAOs, and that's also, subnet DAO is a name which is kind of a mouthful. It might mean something to people who have experience with cryptocurrency. It might not mean something to most other people. DAO stands for, it's DAO, it stands for a Digital Autonomous Organization, which is in and of itself kind of a pretentious name. But what DAO usually means is a framework on a blockchain which allows you to do corporate governance-like things. And so that involves having votes, having different people with different levels of access to make things happen in the program, and stuff like group accounts and wallets, stuff like that. So anyway, the way we use it in Althea is that we have this thing, and we've touched on this a little bit. We have this thing called a concept of a subnet, and this is actually a concept that is also very prevalent in networking in general. And subnet is basically a group of addresses, a group of IP addresses. To get very dry and technical about what it means at the base, it's a group of IP addresses, and those are assigned to the computers in a given local network, usually. So in Althea, subnets, they have the role, just purely for the networking again, the subnets have the role of, with the routing protocol, basically every router in a subnet knows how to get to every other router. And so that's what allows you, if you're hooked up to, if this guy's hooked up to an Althea network, this router here, it knows how to get to every router, including the exit node, which is where it really wants to get. And that can send its packets out to the internet. And then on the other hand, the exit node on that same subnet knows how to get to this router, knows what and so at every hop, each router knows, here's how I get one hop further to this node, this certain destination I'm trying to get to. So anyway, that's very technical, but it's like the basis of it. But in terms of the subnet DAO, or the subnet organization, might be a better term, when we were designing this, we realized that we could make a system where routers are able to pay each other for bandwidth, and you can hook into the network, and you can put the tokens in your router, you can start getting access, or you can hook up an intermediary node and start earning money. And in a perfect world, if the technology was perfect, you might not need a subnet organization. You might be able to have something where you can just, let's say you put up a balloon outside your house and it's got some automatic beamforming thing. You tap in, there's like no work for the user, or for intermediaries, building or just put something up and there's no management. But in the real world, with the technology we have today, there's a lot of this stuff like what Graham's been talking about, which does require some people to sort of smooth over the rough edges, to deal with the bureaucracy and to do all these kind of things. And you can't necessarily expect a collection of loosely associated intermediary nodes to be able to coordinate enough to do all this themselves. The other thing is that people require a lot of support, a lot of tech support, just end users. And a lot of the time it's not even stuff that, there could be no issue with the network. This whole part of it could work great. And the end user, this one here, they have completely unplugged their router, and they might still want to have a place that they can call up and tell them to plug the router back in. And that's actually, the funny thing is, for a lot of ISPs, that's a good proportion. If their network is running well, a very large proportion of their tech support calls are things like that. And so we realized that probably earlier this year, as we started to deploy stuff in Klatskanai, and Deborah started to experience what it's like, and we realized that we needed, or that we could benefit from maybe providing these local groups with a little bit of a framework and some tools to administer their networks, and also a way to receive some money for their sort of coordination of the network. I also have volunteered with a community mesh network in Oakland called People's OpenNet, and so some of those dynamics in that network also inspired this stuff too. So sorry, actually, I'll leave this for now. I'll explain a little bit more about the reasoning behind this, because this interface I'm going to show you, it's actually very, very lightweight. But so the kind of organization which can do the things we're talking about for an ISP, that's the same organization that owns all of the equipment. We're trying to, with these networks, we're trying to break things apart a little bit more, so where somebody can come in, enter into the network, and participate in it and compete and earn money and stuff. But like I was saying before, you still want somebody to take care of the coordination and all that kind of stuff. So the idea of a subnet organization or a subnet DAO is that you have a group of people who are receiving money from the network, or receiving money from the end users, and are able to support those end users technically, and then also smooth things along, coordinate, recruit maybe new intermediary nodes, and also recruit new end users. There's a lot of people who want to be intermediary nodes. They don't want to go out and sell the service to people. They kind of want to set up, they want to invest in some equipment and make a return. They don't really want to get into a whole thing of actually selling the service. So that's another role for the subnet DAO. And the way the subnet DAO is compensated is that they receive, this is a group that receives a flat fee per router that's on the network, per IP address is really how we meter it. And so basically, the way it could work, let's say you lived in an area where there was an Althea network active, and you wanted to get onto it, and so you would talk to a subnet DAO organizer, somebody in this local group, and they might come to your house. It depends on whether you want to do it yourself more. We don't really have a prescribed sort of level of service that we're recommending. We'll have to see what kind of works better for people. Probably a high level of service such as an ISP does is probably what's ideal for most people. But a member of this organization would come to your house and maybe help you install the equipment or do it for you, and also get you set up with your router and get you added to the subnet DAO. So they provide sort of the hand-holding and all that I just went over. So let me show you the interface. And this is built with a thing called Aragon, and Aragon has had it's kind of a complex system, but it's very cool. What it is basically is it's this kind of framework for you to make these organizations. So they have a lot of stuff where they take care of things like permissions and votes. I'm not sure. I don't see the voting thing in the sidebar here. Maybe it's been moved since the last time I worked on this. But the idea is that you can, if you want to start an Althea, if you want to sort of spearhead an Althea network and start a subnet DAO, you start up one of these organizations. You sort of you can kind of sign up on what's like a web page, and it actually deploys to the blockchain, and that gives you an allotment of IP addresses. It will give you, I believe, 64,000 IP addresses that you can give out to people in your area, and that's going to be more actually than the routing protocol is able to handle. So, and then the customer right now will probably integrate this a little bit more deeply into the dashboard, and all the interface stuff we've shown you that Justin showed you this morning. This here, it's all it's kind of like pretty rough right now in terms of design, so it's not the most user-friendly, and the goal there is that we're just trying to get this out and just put the functionality in there, and then once we have a little bit more information about how people use it and experience and stuff like that, we'll really redesign it with the once we really know what people need. But this is what an end user sees. So actually, you know what? Maybe I'll do the adding somebody to the subnet DAO first. So unfortunately, I don't think that I'm going to be able to go through the full thing because not everything is working yet. But basically, for an organizer, you start this subnet, and you can.
So are we looking at all are these all organizers here? Or?
No, they're not actually. No. So you can add other organizers, and so basically, I don't know. I think they've changed how this works since the last time I saw it. So again, not the most user friendly here. This is not very easy to understand. Aragon is evolving quickly as well. So. But basically, you would have you started with your friend Deborah and your other friend. And, you want to go into this as sort of a joint venture almost, and then you can add different people who will have different amounts of voting power over the organization, or they could usually probably just every member would have the same amount of power, unless you had some different arrangement. And so that's basically going to it's going to govern votes in this framework about what's going to happen in there. And that's mostly going to be, I see the vault's not in here either. That's mostly going to be votes about something called the vault, which holds funds for the Subnet DAO. Yeah, Sean?
Could you not build in some rules that would stop people from doing like what he said, jacking up prices? Like, could you not put your own ceiling on there through the subnet?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's an important part of the Subnet DAO actually that I haven't touched on yet. There are, our networking protocols. They do stop. They do. It's the idea is that nodes can take care of themselves on the network to some extent. They can choose the best route and the lowest price and stuff like that. However, there are still things that people can do that are kind of not good for the network. So, in a lot of cases, you might have places where some user nodes only have one upstream, and that upstream might not, like we were discussing this morning, it might not be a good idea, theoretically, for them to jack up the prices, but they might do it anyway. So a lot of times to smooth over those kind of realities, that's also helpful to have an organization locally. And so the Subnet DAO, they have, and as I was going to show you here, the organizer mode, they have a node list. And so these are not like Deborah was saying, these are not the organizers. These are nodes. This is our names here, but this is as if we were all just users using the routers on the network. And so there's a nickname. There's the funds. Some details about them, and you can remove them. So if there's yeah, Deborah.
I was just going to say maybe you could talk a little bit more about where that Ethereum address comes from and how the money is paid from the users to the DAO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, I'll cover that in a second. So, if you had, let's say, you had an intermediary node on this list, and they were doing something that was harmful to the network, obviously you probably don't want to remove them. It's a delicate. It requires a certain amount of just managing things and talking to people. You don't want to shut them off right away because then a bunch of people are going to go offline. But if you have to, the Subnet DAO organizers can take away their IP address. And so also just to an important part about this as well is like if their IP address is taken away, it doesn't mean that they have to cease to operate. You can have you can have nodes that are on multiple Subnet DAOs. That totally works. So you could have multiple Subnet DAOs in an area using the same intermediary nodes, with same intermediary nodes as members. And usually probably a client node won't have multiple addresses. But I think I was mentioning, I think in my talk yesterday I mentioned, you could have a Subnet DAO which is offering a high amount of service to people who want it and charging more, and one that offers a low amount of service to people who are more do-it-yourself. So that's the thing. It's not like this organization is not put in place and just totally can just turn off people's equipment and stuff. Really, what it's governing is a bunch of nodes that have the ability to talk to each other. So if they decide we don't want this node to have the ability to talk to the other nodes on our subnet, they can make that happen. Of course, that person still has fully functioning equipment, and they could be on another subnet, and it would still work for them. So, yeah, but this is the node list. Let's see if this works. I'm going to remove Deborah by Deborah. So this is also, it's using a thing called MetaMask, which is Ethereum interface in the browser, and so it lets you do these kind of applications on the blockchain from your browser. So it's basically approving that I'm sure I want to remove Deborah. I sign the transaction, let's see if this might not work. Oh, this, I think it's, it needs to, let me click on this. And you got to confirm the transaction as well. I'm not going to go into the details there, but basically it put the transaction through. Got rid of Deborah. We're no longer having to deal with her. So there's another thing here. There's the fees, the funds remaining. So I had mentioned that you want to have this local organization have the ability to have an income to support their activities. And in a lot of, from my experience in community mesh groups, it's all volunteers, and that results in, honestly, kind of slow progress on things because people are just doing it in their spare time. The idea with this is to bring some money into it, so they have some funds available to fund their activities, and that's separate from. So you might have the intermediary node, the property owner, sort of making back money from their investment and competing with other intermediary nodes and all that on the bandwidth payments. But on the subnet DAO side, it's actually a fixed monthly fee because some people, I think Justin mentioned it this morning, some people might need a lot of support, and that might not be correlated with how much bandwidth they're using. And so what we're thinking, we don't really know what the ideal level is right now yet, but we're thinking it could be something. We had started out thinking we would have it be lower, 5–10%, but I think that actually, looking at some different scenarios, like half and half might even make sense. And so when I say half and half, obviously the bandwidth payments are going to vary based on someone's usage, but you can't see what the averages are. People, on average in the US, I think in 2015 or 16, they used about 200 gigabytes per month. So that might be higher now. But if you're figuring that they're going to spend $20 on 200 gigabytes, and there's another $20 in subnet DAO fees, or IP leasing fees is technically what it is, then that's kind of a good balance. And so that funds its subnet DAO. And the way that's all done is a user who's just on the subnet DAO. We might also build this into the. We're moving the router dashboard from being a web page that's served by the router to being an app on your phone or computer. It has a few different advantages doing it that way, but we might actually, we probably will actually build this whole interface into it. So especially on the consumer side, so it's like a lot simpler. So it's all in one kind of payments dashboard. You don't have to go to separate places. But the way you do it is you add some funds. So I'm going to add 2. And that goes in there.
You have to add a minimum of 50 billion because it's in Y.
Okay, so there's some math that needs to be done on this interface, but I'm going to add 50 billion way. I don't even know. Okay. So. Okay.
You don't have enough in there?
Oh, I don't know. Oh. No, I think oh, no. That was all my money. I put it all in testnet ether. No, so said it was going to make me rich. No, so I put in, it looks like it got in there, though. So my money's in there now. And that's going to pay my subnet DAO fees for 83.3 days. So it's a very good internet service. Anyway, yeah, so that's what happens, and it's a subscription model. So again, it's we try to have things as trustless as possible, just like the routers pay each other every 5 seconds. This will only, if you decide, if you get kicked out of a subnet, you decide to leave it or whatever, it's only going to take out as much as you had actually used. So
Like prorates this.
it prorates it. Yeah, exactly. You could think of it as a monthly fee, but it will be prorated automatically. That's a pretty small detail, I guess. But node list here, I don't think, honestly, the account I just did this from was actually an organizer. So I don't know if it's going to show up here as I have to make sure that works right. But so basically, the idea is that it's going to be in there, and then the thing that can happen is that the this is organizer view again. So this previous one, user mode, very simple. You just can add and withdraw the funds. Go to organizer mode, then it's more. It's got more features, and obviously we could make this a lot more user friendly. But basically, you can hit the collect bills button as an organizer, and that's going to go and get all of the money that all of the. It's going to take the money sort of out of the subscription area and put it into the wallet of the subnet DAO. And then from there, like I wish I could show you, because I think that what happened is Aragon updated and they took away like the Vault app for some reason. I'm not sure why, but from there you can you can decide you can have rules like let's say there's 3 organizers. It takes all 3 for them to empty the account. It takes 2 of them to take out a large amount of money. It takes, and one person can take out like a little bit. So that way they can decide what to do with the money. There's also, Aragon is hoping to have like in this framework have like a whole world of plugins, and so that's stuff that we're not doing. That's the kind of ecosystem they want to create with their project. And there could be things like different voting methods, like maybe to take the funds out there has to be some kind of vote, maybe some kind of consensus system if you're into that, or holacracy or whatever. It's meant to be a modular tool for building organizations. So that's pretty cool too. Hopefully subnet organizations will be able to take advantage of those features as well. Adding a router to it. I think this doesn't work yet either, but basically there was a place in the router. It works on the router side, but it doesn't work here on the Aragon side, where it will basically like you scan the QR code. So the way we imagine this is if somebody who's with a subnet organization is going to somebody's house to set up this equipment, they have their Althea app on their phone, maybe, and their phone might have cell phone service, so it's able to connect to the internet and get to the blockchain. But what they basically do is open their organizer app on the phone and then go to the router dashboard, which is, I can actually probably just get on the router dashboard if I'm on the right Wi-Fi here. So the idea is they go with the organizer app on their phone, and there's a thing where you hit a button on each side and it has a QR code in the camera. You just kind of hold it up to the screen like that, and the QR codes transfer some data back and forth to get the router added to the subnet's node list. And then from there, the person has to put in some money to pay for the renewal fees. Right now, we don't have any kind of thing where people get kicked off automatically. That's something that you could do, but we think it's probably better to leave it up to, at least in the early stage, leave it up to people's discretion, and allow the organizers to kick people off themselves if that's what they want to do, instead of having it be automatic. So here's how it looks from the router dashboard side. And this is another reason we're switching to the native apps, is because it doesn't let you access the camera in Chrome, and probably in Firefox it still does, but they might also stop allowing that. It's because it's a local. It's not HTTPS. That's the problem. But so you can go here, scan QR code, and then you do this kind of thing where you hold it up and it exchanges the data, get it scanned. So that's the idea there. We were going to do it with like some kind of, also you could do it with like a modem sound kind of thing, and that would have been cooler, but it's also a lot flakier, although we have this cool retro vibe. I don't know. Maybe we could sort of have like a modem sound anyway. It's like not doing anything.
Yes.
Fridge buzz is actually non-functional nowadays.
Oh, what is it?
The buzz of the fridge, the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
It has the buzz still, but apparently that's non-functional anymore. But it's just like there for people to recognize.
Oh, that's really interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
That's weird. All right. So. Thank you. That's the kind of thing we want to be doing. So that's about it. Let's see, bill management. Oh, that's the thing, is you can, if you're an organizer, you get the user mode too. You might be a user as well. So that's basically it. And we're trying to go really lightweight here. Graham, yeah.
When I add funds here, does that pay both the DAO and my bandwidth?
It doesn't. Like I said, we should probably integrate them into one interface. That would be less confusing for people, for sure. But yeah, right now it's a separate step. Yeah?
So is the subnet DAO pluggable currently, or is it fixed? I mean, you and I were talking about this earlier, so that's a question. Like, could this be implemented on another blockchain relatively easily, or is it deeply embedded into the Althea system as is?
No, it's not very deeply embedded at all. It's
Repeat the question for the
oh, I'm sorry. I didn't do that. I didn't do that with Graham's either. So yeah, he was asking if it's how deeply integrated this particular subnet DAO framework is with our software, and I think the reason he's asking is because this is on this is Aragon. It's on the Ethereum blockchain. We want to use a different blockchain like EOS. There's a different product on that blockchain. The answer is it's not. We were careful to make it very modular. So basically, there's one place where the routers interface with this, and that is when they are connecting. So if you got this hooked up here, and the router here is the brains of the operation, and it's hooked up to this, and this hooks up to this other antenna over here, and there's a router on the other end, antenna. And what happens is when it sees a new neighbor, it checks with a blockchain to see if that neighbor is on its subnet, and that's it. So as long as you have some way for it to check whether a given neighbor is on the subnet, that's going to work. And so here we have this software is adding and removing from this list here. But as long as you have something which just returns true or false, that's the point of integration. So it's very, very, very lightweight point of integration there. So yeah, so with this we've tried to, well, I mean, first of all, I guess because it's just for ease of development, it's very bare bones. But we also think that we don't really want to tell people how to do things at this stage, at least. I think maybe it's at some point once we have seen more of these in action, see how it goes. Maybe we can give people more advice or guidelines, or almost like a franchise guide, almost like if you're starting McDonald's, like here's what you do, here's how you do it. But right now we're trying to keep it pretty lightweight, and people can make their decisions in person, and then these are just tools that let you hold the funds, let you administer the network, let you collect the subscriptions, and it's basically up to you how you want to use that. So that's kind of the idea there, and I think that's a view of the subnet organization. That's kind of it's a little bit more tech-centric, maybe. And I don't know, Deborah, if you want to add anything. How much time do we have left? Oh yeah, Graham?
Does an intermediary have to pay DAO fees if they're only an intermediary?
He was asking, does an intermediary have to pay fees? The answer is, with this software, yes, they do. Usually, oh yeah, and Deborah was adding that they don't pay for their customers. Every customer pays for themselves. They pay for technically it's an IP leasing fee, so everyone pays for their IP. So yeah, an intermediary will pay their subnet DAO that. And we could make it so that you'd have some arrangement as a subnet DAO where the intermediaries get it free because they're providing a valuable service and all that. You could go the other way too. You could say that they're benefiting from all these customers. The subnet DAO is kind of the organization that brings the customers to the table. And so you could say, actually, really, it should be that the intermediary nodes pay a larger fee because they're making all this money off the bandwidth payments. But right now, we just have them pay the same fee as everyone, which probably if you're an intermediary, it's not going to, the subnet DAO fee is not going to be making a big difference either way, because you probably spent a good amount of money on equipment and hopefully are making a good amount of money per month on bandwidth payments. Yes?
So on that same path of conversation then, is there a code path for the subnet DAO to know how much money is going into any given intermediary so that you could change the fee structure to percentages?
Yeah, so the question was, is there a code path for the subnet DAO to know how much money is going into a given intermediary? That's a very interesting question. I thought about this for a long time. There are a lot of ways that they could know. So another thing I want to address with subnet DAOs is there's actually a lot of management tools which can manage a large number of nodes at once, and it's useful. And so like we kind of our goal is to have everything be as autonomous and like decentralized as possible, where the nodes are taking care of themselves. But there are things like UNMS, which some of you have experience with, and you can upgrade a bunch of nodes at once, and it is useful to have somebody who can do these kind of things. So we'll have to see how it evolves with our real-world deployments, but that could also be a role that subnet DAOs could play. And basically what that boils down to is having admin access on a bunch of client devices. And so if a subnet DAO, if the organization behind it has that kind of access, then they will be able to tell how much traffic is going into a given intermediary node. But there's no general way for them to tell from a very basic logical perspective. If you're not dealing with them having admin access on routers, there's no completely generalized way for them to tell. So, yeah, Grum?
A follow-up question, my last one. If I were to become an intermediary, would it be in my best interest to just make myself a subnet DAO also and still let other subnet DAOs route through me?
Yeah, it could be. So that's actually, that's another interesting topic. So if you make yourself a subnet DAO, let's say you're an intermediary and you, there's a subnet DAO in town, the Klatskanai Co-op or whatever, and you're part of their subnet DAO and they have a bunch of customers who connect to you, you're like, okay, this is great. But then there's a bunch of other customers that you can see too, and you're like, hey, you know what? I could just get these customers hooked up myself. Why is Deborah getting $20 a month from every one of these guys? So at that point, you can absolutely do that. But of course, then Deborah's not going to be helping you service those customers. So it's really up to Oh, go ahead.
I'm asking more, even if I am not going to serve those customers and Deborah's going to keep serving them, but Deborah's traffic has to go through me to get somewhere, is it in my best interest to still become a subnet DAO, even if I'm not serving any customers, so that I'm not paying subnet DAO fees?
Oh yeah. So your fees they're a leasing fee for your IP address that you got from Deborah, and you don't have any ability to talk to Deborah's customers without that IP address. Yeah. So that's what you're paying for. What the IP leasing fees are for. They pay for access to this network, which is effectively controlled by a subnet organization. And it's like not, the physical network is not controlled by them. The hardware is not controlled by them, although there may be exceptions to that, of course. But it's really the logical network that's controlled by them. And there's also another role, which is not a huge concern, but it's kind of like another base level, I guess, sort of incentive or incentive or kind of, I don't know what the word for it is, but it's a very basic thing, which is that without the subnet DAO, there's the possibility for Sybil attacks. That's where somebody spins up a bunch of fake IP addresses, like 1 million fake IP addresses. The routing protocols in these routers will accept that without question, and they will try to propagate 1 million IP addresses, and it will crash the network. So there actually aren't too many really good ways for the routing protocol to actually be able to tell what's real and what's not. So what the subnet DAO also does, it provides a limiting factor on that kind of attack. Although that's not an attack that I think would be very common either way. But yeah. Yes.
So if a node is part of multiple subnet DAOs, does it have one common Ethereum address for all of those, or a separate address for DAO?
Yeah, a node will have it will have the same Ethereum address no matter what. That corresponds to the private key that the node uses to sign transactions, to make payments and stuff in Ethereum.
Same wallet,
Yeah, same wallet. We'll have different IP addresses though. The other thing is, if it's part of multiple subnet DAOs and they're big subnets, that means it's going to have in its memory, it's going to have all the routes, basically the routing table of both of those subnets. So, we know that these little routers can do maybe 12,000 have 12,000 nodes in their network before they run out of memory. But if you start to be part of multiple subnet DAOs, you might start to hit that limit. But yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
So your Ethereum addresses, how exactly are they connected to the IP address? do you guys provide that address, or like essentially what I'm asking is like, how is your wallet basically connected to your router?
Yeah, so the router, when it starts up, it will, and Justin, I might be wrong on the exact details of this procedure when it starts up, but when it starts up for the first time, it will randomly generate an Ethereum address. And it has the private key inside of the router. And on the router dashboard, you have an address where you can send funds. It's a QR code on the front page. So the idea is for most people, they'll have a wallet on their phone, and they'll go and they'll send funds to the Ethereum address of their router. So that's how that works. When joining a subnet DAO, that's the thing with the two QR code things I was talking about. That's where it will exchange the subnet DAO will tell it what its IP range is, and the router will say what its Ethereum address is, and the subnet DAO will give the router an IP address in that range. And that's kind of how it works. So the IP address is given to you by the subnet DAO. And that's how you're identifier on the network. And your Ethereum address is kind of used just for payments, and that's going to be the same regardless.
And your private key, you said it is inside the router?
Yeah, there's a private key inside the router. It's really the router's Ethereum address. We don't really recommend that people put their life savings into a router. It's like, it's like connected to the internet. It's, you might want to keep like $50 in there to pay the month's internet. So, yeah. Oh, yes?
So if I'm trying to pay an intermediary, how do I make sure that the Ethereum address that I'm sending to is the correct one for like the IP address? Because I would know like which intermediaries I want to pay based on the IP address, but I would also somehow need to connect that to an Ethereum address in order to actually make the payment.
No, you'll never deal yourself with paying intermediaries. So. Okay. You load money to the router, and the router will automatically make payment channels with the intermediaries that it needs to pay to get access. So as a user, you do two things. You load money into your router for bandwidth payments, and you load money into the subnet DAO like subscription thing for your subnet DAO fees. And so that's it. And we'll probably, honestly, those two things can probably be integrated into one experience. So it's like, you just load up your money for the month, and it says, last month you spent $20 for your subnet fees, and you spent another $15 on bandwidth because you used 150 gigabytes, and part of it was your phone, part of it, that kind of thing. So it's really we're trying to get it to one thing where you load up money, and that's it. Yeah.
So is there so that's pretty much like your bill at the end of the month, right?
Yeah.
Is there any sort of auditing to show exactly what nodes you've been paying and sort of how much traffic and that sort of thing, and to allow you to have insights into whether you want to adjust your price to quality ratio?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see here, what's going on. So yeah, that's what this is for, and this is honestly not the most easy to understand, but that's kind of this is the rudimentary version of that. Basically, it shows your neighbors, and it shows how much payment you've sent them, how much you have paid them, and what their price is. And there could be all kinds of analytics around the price quality trade-off, because obviously right now it's kind of you don't really know what this means. The price here also, this is for only if you're selling, so we might want to make that a little bit clearer as well, that this is more, and honestly, the price setting stuff, most people, if you really, that might almost be more of that's on really the advanced page, like for intermediaries, because most people are never going to deal with this. So, yeah, right now it's not the most user-friendly, but the information exists that you could break out all kinds of different graphs. You could do stuff like, your router knows which devices are connecting to it. Jehan's iPhone. So if you see that you got some device on your network that's sending out 10 gigabytes a day and it's costing you an arm and a leg, that might be part of a botnet or something. So, and I would say this is a little bit it's certainly a little bit more mental overhead than people have when they're dealing with a single fixed cost unlimited subscription. And that's actually one of our, I think that's probably one of the biggest points of friction that we'll have is that. If a lot of the other stuff we can kind of improve the experience and make it easy and stuff like that, but this is a fundamental part of it, is you're paying for your bandwidth. The flip side of that, though, is that if people are used to it from cell phones, and having people pay for the bandwidth, I think will also result in Althea networks generally being less congested, because people will take a little bit more responsibility for their use. So hopefully it will improve the service a bit as well. So. Yes?
Sorry, going back to the Ethereum stuff, are you able to reset that, like the address, to a new address?
He was asking, are you able to set the Ethereum address in your router to a new address? I don't think we have anything in the UI to do that. Obviously, that's something that you might want to do sometimes.
It's like a big file. It's a bit of a pain, but yeah.
Yeah. Just you know, just curl in and you get the config file and you open a Vim. No big deal. No, but that's not in the UI, but that might be a feed. We probably, honestly, that kind of thing we'd also want to tread carefully too, because you don't want someone to reset their address and they had $100 in there or something and be like, what do you mean my money's gone? Like, you know. So yeah. Yes?
So most of the conversation has been about bandwidth consumption pulling from downstream. But for people who are putting up media servers, how does all of this impact? If you've got a local media server at home, you're pushing bandwidth back out.
They'll pay for that bandwidth.
Both ways. That's what I'm asking. Like, is that a separate bandwidth fee?
And so it's pay per forward. So
Um,
if you're uploading, you'll pay the same as if you're downloading, because most of the time prices are the same.
Let me just repeat the question. So he was asking, if you have a media server, how does that look? Because mostly we would talk about paying for downloads, because that's most people's consumption is mostly downloads. And what Justin was saying is pay for forward. So that doesn't really impact the the end user that much. So if you remember the exit nodes, the way it works is if you've got your router and you got a media server connected to this, then your router and it's going through this and it's going over there and stuff, and that's out to the internet. You're uploading your routers. That's going to be your router basically paying for the bytes uploaded to that guy over there. And this does not impact the user. It doesn't change what the user sees at all or anything like that. But basically, this guy over there is going to get some money for uploading it. And then what happens is at the exit, so your selected exit here, you have a payment channel open to them as well, and they pay for the traffic coming back down the network to you. And that's how you get both sides of the equation. But again, to the user, that's not going to be that's not going to be very apparent to them. Let's just lump it into one thing, unless you really want to break it out into upload and download if you want that information and stuff. So. Cool.